Exit Rich. Today is another special treat, and I know you always hear me say that, but it's extra special because I have Sharon Lechter. Now, I always read everybody's long bios and really go through a long, elaborate introduction, but Sharon Lechter really doesn't need an introduction because everybody knows who she is. Every time I talk to somebody, I'm like, "Do you know Sharon Lechter? Do you know Sharon Lechter? Do you know Sharon Lechter?" And I'm like, "Of course, of course, of course I do." So anyway, Sharon Lechter is my author. We both authored the book Exit Rich, and it is the second year anniversary coming out. Sharon's holding up a cover, and you can see it right behind me as well. And Sharon Lechter is an entrepreneur, international speaker, best-selling author. In fact, she is a 5 times New York Times best-selling author and 5 times New York Times bestselling author. I had to say that again because it's so impressive. And she's done a lot of work with Robert Kiyosaki, with Rich Dad Poor Dad. She's also Sharon Lechter is a premier expert for financial literacy and entrepreneurial success. And again, working with large names such as Robert Kiyosaki, co-writing a best-selling book, Think and Go Rich, Disney and Time Warner. She's also the CFO of financial literacy company Pay Your Family First, which lays the foundation of financial literacy among adults and teens alike. You know what? My daughter is 12 years old, Sharon, so I really need her to read that book. I need to get her involved in your programs. So, welcome to the show, Sharon. We reunite 2 years later after Exit Rich came
I
out.
know. I love it. I love it. So good to be with you, Michelle. And what an incredible journey it's been. I mean, COVID hit us right when we were supposed to launch the book and we delayed it for a bit. But when it came out, it was just to amazing results. And people, I can't tell you how many people tell me, I wish I'd read this before I sold my company. I love it. And then people just over and over again, they find that the jewels and the nuggets of really how to not just be have a successful company, but how to make it sustainable and scalable, and then ultimately saleable or exit without having to sell. Is an amazing content, and I think it was absolutely a fun project to combine your intellectual property with mine to really create something that was exponentially good. So
Yes, I've never heard a bad comment about Exit Rich. In fact, if you go read the Amazon reviews, they're really, really, really good. And I remember Sharon, we had to push the launch back several months, if not a year, because of COVID. We were originally going to
I
do
think it was almost a
20.
year, yeah, that we
Yeah,
pushed it back.
we
Yeah.
were going to come out in 2020, so we ended up
Mhm.
releasing. I think it was June or July of 2021. So we're right here 2 years later. But yeah, it's been quite the journey to even get the book out because of COVID and we had to pivot like everybody else did. And that was quite the journey. But I remember, you and I doing pre launches and business owners ordering the book, and they would call me and say, or email us and say, listen, I got Exit Rich. I'm printing it out on ledger paper. I'm giving it to all of my department heads. And I'm telling them, do what this lady says to do, follow it, do what these ladies say to do, and follow it word by word. And especially when it comes to the 6 P's, which are remember people, you gotta have the right people, you gotta have the right people in the right team, you gotta have the right people in the right seats, you gotta have a management team, you need to work on it, not in it. You gotta have the right products and you gotta, really be able to have reoccurring revenues and you have to be able to have diversified revenue streams. And then we go through the processes and sharing processes are your big thing as well. And then proprietary patrons and profits. So literally there were companies just going off the ledger paper of Exit Rich and teaching their teams or having their teams lead their employees on how they should be building this business. So it
I
is.
think it really opened their eyes, Michelle, to where the value is in your company. So people don't think about the fact that your business systems, your processes add tremendous value to your business and give you competitive advantage. We talk about intellectual property, which is under your proprietary, and that's something that you need to identify it, you need to protect it, and you need to leverage it. A lot of times people have intellectual property, but they don't even recognize it. And so by putting this all together in this book, it helps people really analyze their company from stem to stern to make sure that they've done what they need to get ready. And I love the story that you share about the company. I can't remember what it was. It was 60 million you were going to sell, and they didn't have the right to transfer in their client contracts.
Hmm.
And that's something that, obviously buyer doesn't want it if it's not transferable. So they had to go back and renegotiate. I believe you tell that story, and I just love it. I think it's such an impactful thing for people to understand they have the right contracts, they have the right agreements, so that they're setting themselves up for the ability to sell. And you need to do that up front so that you don't look like you're not, you don't have everything lined up ready to sell. You don't want them telling you have something wrong. You want to find it before you put your business and
A
correct it.
thousand percent, because every time, Sharon, they tell you that you have something wrong, that's when they start subtracting zeros.
Yep,
The more
yep.
you have wrong in your business, the less infrastructure you have. You don't have the right people in the right place. If you don't have congruent revenue streams, if you don't have the processes all buttoned up, if you don't have those proprietary assets, if you have customer concentration versus customer diversification, and you're not profitable, you start losing zeros. And that's what's happening to a lot of Gen Z and millennial businesses today, is they build these great businesses, but they don't have the infrastructure. And it really, really hurts them because, again, for every issue that a buyer finds, they subtract. We want them to add. We want them to say, oh my gosh, you have a great team in place. The business can run without you. Let's add a zero. Or you,
Yes, it's crazy when you put your house up for sale, you go through and you make it look nice and you make it pretty and make sure everything's up to date. And then, but when you sell your business, it's like you don't even think to do that. And that's so important to make sure you've got things straightened out and you have the right legal agreements. I mean, it's crazy. One
yeah,
of the areas.
1,000%. They make you stage your house. I'm just looking at putting my house on the market, and a real estate agent came in and said, all right, you pretty much need to empty out everything and start over, get rid of the clutter. And you're right. So many people don't do that with their business. They just think about, hey, it's a business. Here it is. I mean, they don't think about all the issues that could arise, like having independent contractors instead of employees. That was a deal that we just dealt with. The manufacturing company has 60 should be employees, are all independent contractors working on the manufacturing floor and in the warehouse. What happens, Sharon, if that employee gets hurt, loses a limb, something catastrophic, and there's no workers' comp? They lose their business. Plus, we have to go back in and subtract all of that money because then we have to convert that employee over to W-2. So there's just so many nuances.
Yeah, it's so, and along that line, a lot of companies, in fact, the vast majority, when you're talking about millennials and Gen Z, they outsource everything. And so they hire somebody to do their website, they hire somebody to do their pictures, they hire somebody to do their social media, and they don't do a work for hire agreement. And so when they build this company really big and somebody comes up to buy it and they realize they don't really own what they think they own
Hmm.
because they never got a work for hire agreement. And I see this over and over and over again. You may think you own it because you paid for it, but you don't unless you have work for hire that says once I pay you, the rights in that ownership transfer to me. And it's such an important piece of business that people overlook.
Yeah, we even take it one step further and say Tyler Tucker owns all this content that you're creating and really make it ironclad. I know your husband's an attorney, so I'm
Yeah,
sure.
our work for hire agreements are pretty ironclad. We make sure that people use those, but and as in businesses today, people are they're loosey goosey. That's a technical term for you.
I think
They're
they're
loosey
really
goosey.
goosey. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they don't do what they need to make sure that their business is clean as a whistle. And that when a buyer comes in, exactly what you said, they start reducing zeros because and if their people can find it, yours should kind of find it first so you can correct it. And that's the big issue. Another thing, when we talk about patrons, the P for patrons is a huge issue for millennials and Gen Z. And I'm sure you've come across this. In the world today, we're all about social media. So you may have millions of followers in social media, but you don't own those names. And many people have found out that sometimes they can turn them off on you. And so it's so important. Yeah, you want to have that lead generation, you want to have millions of names, but you want to nurture them and invite them to your database, because a lot of companies sell simply for their database, and you want to make sure that people tell me that, oh, I have 2 million followers on Instagram. I said, well, how many are in your database? 8,000. I go, okay, we have a little work to do. So it's really important for people to understand the full picture of all the 6 P's.
Yeah, because I always tell them, you don't got anything. Facebook has it. So, what do you recommend there? Creating like a little lead funnel, or a lead funnel, like give away a chapter, give away a book, give away something to get that
Yeah,
contact.
you just want to capture their emails. And so on social media, you can say, for 10 tips on, for me, it's like, for 10 tips to improve your credit score, go here. And is there a link? And to get it, they put in their email. Or for a free ebook, go here and claim it. Or, take this survey and, offer a survey into social media. And that survey is housed on your website.
Hmm.
So all of those things are ways to nurture them. Give them things. I always say give, 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 sell, right? Give,
Right.
give, give, ask. Um, but every time you give something, it's an opportunity for you to have another connection point, because people don't want to do business with people unless they know, like, and trust you. So the more you give, the more value, the more they're going to elevate that level of trust.
Mm-hmm. 1,000%. I think that's so important. I don't see too many people doing that on social media. So that's huge because it is. I mean, your database is worth a lot of money, just like other proprietary assets.
Well, we talk about like 40 years ago now, Michelle, I did analysis that Fortune 500 companies were 85% bricks and mortar, 15% intangible assets. And that's more than flipped now. So over 90% intangible assets, and very, very little bricks and mortar. And so it's really, and that allows us to compete with the big boys because everything's intangible. But inherently with that, you also need to position yourself to protect those intangible assets, intellectual property, goodwill. And you can talk for hours about goodwill, because that's the gray area in your business where you need to pull it together and value it. And so it's really important as a business owner to identify your goodwill. It could be location, it could be exclusive contracts, it could be intellectual property, it could be lots of different things that comprise goodwill that adds back those zeros that you just talked about.
Yep. And that's what we want to keep doing, is adding back those zeros, because a lot of people think, oh, evaluations are so easy. It's just based on a multiple of EBITDA or multiple of revenue. And it's not that simple. You really do want to take into consideration the people on your team, because people are really buying companies for talent. It's very hard to get good people these days. And it's especially hard to get people with really good talent, people who are smarter than you. And so, what we do when we evaluate a business is we really identify those synergies. What sets this company apart? Like, we were selling a manufacturing business, and one of the biggest things that we thought could be really attractive to some of our buyers is that this company did distribution all over the country, manufacturing distribution all over the country, but they only have one distribution center. They have a manufacturing plant, one distribution center. We found a buyer, because what we start trying to do is add back those zeros right away. So we found a buyer that had same manufacturing, similar products, distribution nationwide. So the first thing that that company can do is subtract the cost of that distribution center, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it was several million actually. And so what we look for is, if we find a strategic buyer, then that right buyer can go in and buy the company, but take advantage of economy of scales, but also see what they can cut because they already have it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we also.
And the same thing, and when you think about location, a company may be very successful in the Southwest, um, and they don't really want to put in the energy to do bricks and mortar, but they have a ready market in Florida. So you find a company there and you do a strategic alliance and you expand based on location. And in doing that, you have a whole new revenue stream. You have the ability to attract more buyers, and you become more attractive for that. There might be a company in Florida who wants to enter the Southwest market. So, 1 + 1 is 11, not two, when you have something like that, because you have the ability to exponentially increase your impact, your sales, your reach.
Yeah, 1000%. So we have a few comments. Charlotte says, "Hello, ladies." Hello,
Hello,
Charlotte.
Charlotte.
And then Tim asked a question: what are some common challenges or mistakes that business owners make when preparing for an exit? How does Exit Rich address these challenges?
Well, I can certainly, I mean, with some of the things we've just been talking about are very much covered in the book. And that's, some of the common mistakes is they don't prepare. They don't get themselves ready for sale. They don't go through and do a checklist, an audit of are they ready? Have they audited their legal agreements? Have they audited to make sure the contracts are transferable? Have they audited to make sure they have their intellectual property in house? And it's basically identified, protected, and all those things you have to put together. We talk about in Exit Rich a marketing lookbook, and then the basic due diligence book, where you've gone through and you've done the work. So when somebody comes in as a potential buyer, they're impressed. They see you have your act together, and so you don't lose those zeros. And so all of those things we cover in the book about lots of mistakes. Michelle has incredible examples of actual real life stories where mistakes happen. She was able to step in and correct those and help sellers get a lot more money. And so it's really important to make sure you have the right advisors. Make sure you have people who have experience in what you want to do. Don't hire somebody to learn on your dime. Make somebody's coming in that knows the industry, knows the market, and more than likely, like Michelle, they have a database of potential buyers ready to go. And so a lot of times it's matchmaking, not just listing. And so it's really important, all those things we talk about in the book. But I think, not having your database up to date is a very big issue. A lot of businesses falter on not having work for hire agreements, not having third party agreements, and not having things transferable are some of the biggest items that I see with companies that are unable to sell.
Hmm. Yes, I agree with all that. And it's very difficult for an owner to do that because, first of all, many owners are working in their business, not on their business. And so it's very difficult to set everything aside and start working on gathering all this stuff together and really fixing your business, because before you even really put your business on the market, you should really get with an expert and make sure you have all your ducks in a row, and tweak your business as you go. Because there are so many things like making sure you have the employment agreements, making sure you have the work for hire, making sure you have the non competes, making sure that you have all your documentation buttoned up, making sure that you have your organizational paperwork, your LLCs, all the minutes that you're supposed to keep up with. Many companies don't even have that. And then making
Oh,
sure.
that's so true. That's so true. And documenting business systems. So many business owners, and I know this is so true for you, but so many business owners don't really own a business, they own a job.
Mhm.
Their business can't survive outside of them being there. And it's hard to sell a business when you are an integral part of it. So the first step is to build your business with the systems, the intellectual property, the processes that it can run without you. And I know there's another question I just saw pop up kind of along that line. And so, in essence, you're exiting your position before you exit the business, because you're creating a sustainable business that becomes an asset. My favorite word on earth, an asset. That asset is
Assets are
working.
sexy.
Assets are sexy, and those assets and that business is working for you. You have the right people in the right seats, you have the right systems, processes, and it becomes a singing machine. and that's what you want. And then as you have a singing machine that is scalable and sustainable, that's when you can exit from a standpoint of getting a big payday. But
Mhm.
first, you have to create the opportunity to exit as your time, get your time back first, so that you have a smooth operating machine.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's little challenges pop up when you're trying to sell a business that, again, people don't think of. We're in the middle of selling a company right now with SBA, and when you have SBA involved, it's even more difficult. And the seller CPA did not pay the franchise tax, and so that's now holding up the sale. And so it goes, well, I thought the CPA paid. And the CPA goes, well, you didn't give it to me. And so it's going to be a constant battle back and forth. But there's all these little things that are going to pop up. There's all these things you should do to prepare your business for sale, like making sure you have the right team, the right products in place, you know, making sure you have your processes, everything buttoned up, making sure you have customer diversification. But then there's all these things that pop up that you don't think about. Oh, there was a lawsuit that was filed, but it sat dormant for the last 8 months to a year and you forgot about it. Or there's this tax issue or this or that. You thought somebody was going to
Or
pay
a personal guarantee on something that
for
you
a
forgot that
guarantee.
you've ever signed, and it comes to bear later.
Right. So she speaks from experience. So all these different little things pop up, and you really do need an expert to walk you through all that because, like she said, and I agree with this. Is what I always say. Most people own a glorified job and not a business. So it's very hard to go through all those things. Plus, it's hard for a seller to identify. Oh, wait a minute. There's a manufacturing company that has distribution nationwide. They're going to shut my $10 million plant down or whatever it costs and boom, that's a $10 million plus in EBITDA for them, right? It's a huge increase in EBITDA. And so, or you know what? They're going to pay a lot more money because I have this database and I have all this detail. Like we sold a app, and so the app business, and I can't tell you what they were doing, but they collected data and data and data day after day after day of where people traveled, what
Yeah,
people did, who their
it's really,
habits were.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so important to separate the emotion from the business, because as an owner, it's your baby. And I always tell people high emotion, low intelligence. That's why you need to have somebody like Michelle on your team, somebody who's coming into it from a seasoned experience that can help you understand that even though it may seem like they don't want a piece of your baby, you're going to get a bigger piece of their pie. So it's important to separate the emotion from the actual process of the sale.
Yeah, because there is buyer's remorse and seller's remorse. I used to say, it's always seller's remorse and buyer's remorse. But now it's not really buyer's remorse because look, there's so many businesses out there for sale at any given time. There's 30.2 million businesses in the United States. 40 to 60% will be up for sale, believe it or not, 30 to 40, 50%. And so it's a pretty competitive landscape. And now, in the businesses that we sell, which is typically 10 million and up, it's private equity, it's venture capital. They don't care. They're not emotionally attached. It's all financial, financial, financial. It's all about strategy. It's all about how they can be strategic and catapult their current businesses to the next level.
Yeah, I don't see too much emotion on the buyer side, except when they get excited when they find something, a problem that brings down the price, that they get
Exactly.
emotional about that. They like that.
I
But
like that.
but the seller, it's like, what do you mean you're not interested in this? It's like their baby. So it's
Well, when it's
really,
first time buyers, they get really emotional. And when it's a buyer that only has a few companies, when you start talking to PEGs and venture capital, like that, we're not emotional. We're all financial buyers. Does it make sense? Is it logical? So then there's another question here. The book also explores the concept of building a sustainable business that can thrive without the owner's direct involvement. What are some of the steps or principles discussed in Exit Rich? And how can Okay, so one of the first things that you can do is really take inventory of your team and take inventory of your task and assign seats. So you need to look and say, okay, what are the seats in the company? Who are my people? And make sure that you have the right people in the right seats because Sharon, I know that you've seen lots of organizations where they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole and it just doesn't fit but they don't want to take the time of retraining that person for another position or letting that person go.
Yeah, I also see where when somebody is really preparing their business for sale, there, and I'll let you speak to this, but I'll bring up the issue. It's so important to strategize when you are going to disclose things to your employees, and how you're going to keep them. Because what I see, what happens is somebody's ready to sell their business, and the employees hear wind of it and they start exiting, which is not good from a standpoint of the buyer if they want to maintain the operations as is. So it's really important to understand, what you are going to do. When we sold the Talking Children's book company back in 1991, they were absorbing it into this large publishing company, and so I had 127 employees that were going to be out of a job. So we negotiated that they would get very nice severance packages and outplacement. And literally all but two people we found new jobs for. And that we didn't need to do that. We didn't have to do that, but we wanted to do that. And those two people made the decision not to continue working. So it's when you are looking at staying viable through the sales process, you need to maintain your workforce. And that's an issue a lot of people don't think about. And then, when do you tell them? And do you tell your executive team and then your employees? So you have tons of experience on that, Michelle, but I think it's important to address that too.
Yeah, it's probably one of the biggest reasons to buy or not buy a company. And private equity groups, strategic buyers, venture capital, they typically will not buy a business without the seller staying on and retaining a percentage. So a lot of the offers that we've been seeing over the last several years, or they'll buy 60, 70, 80, 90% of the business. Most of them want the seller to have at least 20 to 30% stake in the company. And so a lot of business owners think, oh, I'm going to sell, I'm going to travel the world, I'm going to be done. No. In most cases, that's not happening unless you've really built a sustainable, sellable, scalable business that can run without you. If the business can, because we're selling a $60 million electrical company, and that owner works in, he has multiple locations. He works in the business about 10 to 15 hours a week. He's really not needed. He's got all of his project managers, a CFO, a COO. It's really not needed. But every offer coming in still wants the reassurance that he's going to retain some equity. Now, we have had a couple of offers with 100% buyout, but for most businesses, especially the larger type, I would say mid market to the larger type of companies, are definitely going to want to make sure that the owner stays for 2 to 3 years.
And that's, where they come into golden handcuffs. And that's, if you are the head guru in your company, you probably know the half a dozen people that are essential in your business that need to stay as well. And
Mm.
so it's really important to really be cognizant of it, because otherwise you're going to make your own life hell. Make sure you take care of those people and have agreements for them. Either they stay until they're not needed and they get a severance package, they get a bonus for staying, or they have ongoing employment contracts with a new owner. I mean, you want to make sure you take care of your people so that you don't have a rough landing when it comes down to selling the business and they start leaving at the end of the day.
Yeah, 1,000%. And you can't do this. So you can do this ahead of time, like really making sure you have the right team in place and start, making sure that maybe they have some profit sharing, maybe they have this type of incentive, that type of incentive. But you don't want to tell them that you're selling until it's done. Now there are certain heads, CEO or CFO, that might have to be bought in to the conversations. But for the rest of the employees, like we just sold a company that had 400 employees. We didn't tell anybody but the CFO and the COO because people start jumping ship. They get, everybody likes comfort. People don't like to step outside their comfort zone. So they want to stay in that comfort zone, and they're concerned, oh, this new owner is going to come in and fire us. We're not going to give the same benefits. We're not going to serve us pizza on Fridays.
It's all about what's in it for me.
What's in it for them, right? And I had a seller actually do that. That was with a And that might have been the company you were talking about earlier, Sharon. It's a $60 million company we sold in Texas. It was oil manufacturing. This seller did everything opposite that I told him to do. I told him, do not talk to buyer without me being present and don't promise anything. What does he do? He goes and talks to the buyer, gives away this guy, and then blames me for negotiating too much. And I wasn't even there. Then I told him, do not tell your employees. What does he do? He tells all of his employees. He had three jump ship. He had four or five demand a raise right then and there. And so you don't want to tell your employees anything. Now, your key employees, when it gets really, really close and due diligence is signed off on, and you know you're almost at the finish line. But even though you think you're almost at the finish line, you might not be. I always tell people don't call.
Oh, believe me, how many times has the closing date been delayed because of some piece of due diligence? Every time. I don't know that I mean, almost every time.
Yeah.
You think it's going to close on March 1st, and July 1st, you're maybe signing the paperwork. So, yes, lots of strings. You want to reduce the amount of hair on the deal before you go into it, if at all possible, because
You
the
want to do
buyer's
that.
attorneys are going to find more hair.
Yeah. And they will find it. You want to do that before you even go to market. And that's why it's really imperative to have a good M&A advisor because you want to reduce the hair before you even go to market. And you want to go ahead and point out all the skeletons in the boxes because in the closets because they're going to find it anyway. And so, yeah, it's like we have one deal that still hasn't closed. It's a $70 million agriculture company, and due diligence went on over a year. And now lending and interest rates and everything went up. So it's really a difficult, difficult process to manage and to be able to navigate that and, navigate everything that can pop up. So Hayden asks, can you describe the differences between what private equity groups and strategic buyers are looking for when buying a company? You want to take that one, Sharon? Or you want me to?
Well, I'll start. You're the expert on that stuff, but private equity groups they come in all shapes and sizes. I have a client that just sold to an equity group, and they are looking in one particular industry. They want to buy these particular practices all over the country, roll it up, and then sell. And so they have a 5-year buyout and a 10-year plan, right?
Hmm.
And so they're specifically looking at rolling up or organizations within a specific industry. Other
Hmm.
private equity groups are looking at individual deals on companies that are set for expansion, where the management team stays in place. They're just helping fund it for a big piece of the pie. They're adding strategic mentorship, board of director seats. And so there's different ways to deal with private equity firms. A strategic buyer can be a private equity company. A
Hmm.
strategic buyer could be a mom and pop business in Atlanta, Georgia that wants to expand in Arizona so they can have a winter home here. And so they look to find a company here that aligns with what they do and they buy it as a strategic effort to expand their reach and location nexus. So there's I mean, I could go on and on, but I think, Michelle, I think you live with this every single day. So why don't you add your
Yeah.
2 cents on this?
This is why we make a good team. So, private equity groups buy based on platforms and add ons, and they usually have a minimum of anywhere from 2 million to 5 million EBITDA requirement before they will
Mhm.
even look at the business for an add on. I mean, I'm sorry, for a platform. So, if you're in food manufacturing, if they're in food manufacturing, they're not going to look for add-ons. If they want to get into food manufacturing, they'll look for a platform. Add-ons they'll look at that's under $1 million in EBITDA to add on. The problem is when they're looking at a platform, they don't really have anything. They don't. It's not really strategic, so they don't really have any synergistic companies in there unless like we're dealing with one right now that has electrical company and they're doing all solar panels. So they're looking at electrical company that's contract labor. So they have labor to put in those solar panels. Otherwise, most private equity groups looking at platforms don't really have that strategic edge where they're willing to pay more for those synergies. So therefore, it becomes a financial decision over a synergistic decision. Unlike strategics, because we can really point out, the opportunities and how it's going to explode their business and take it to the next level, and whether that's contracts. I think another company you might have been referring to, Sharon, is a oil manufacturing company. We've done a lot in the energy sector, but an oil manufacturing company we sold in Louisiana, they had a huge contract. And um, the thing about the company was difficult to sell because they had customer concentration versus customer diversification. And 40% of their revenues, no, it was 60%. I'm sorry, 60% of their revenues was tied up in BP, British Petroleum. And so clients were really, really, buyers were nervous about that, and they're going to mitigate their risk. So they're going to ask for earnouts and seller financing and all this other stuff. Whereas I had an 80-year-old seller and a 50-year-old seller. They were partners, and 80-year-old was like, I'm not doing any of that. And he was very difficult to work with. I'm like, fine, let me just go find another buyer. I just want you 17 offers, but they all mitigate their risk. And so finally I found a strategic, and the strategic was manufacturing similar products and delivering similar services, but not competitive. It wasn't competitive. But this manufacturing company had been trying to get into British Petroleum for years, for decades, and could never get their foot in the door. So for a company like that, this company was worth a lot of money. So they were willing to outbid everybody else just so that they could get the BP contract. That's things that M&A advisors will look for, point out, and make sure that they find the right buyers.
That's a perfect example of a strategic buyer. Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah. And so I prefer strategics versus private equities. Now, my private equity is listening. If you are, I still love y'all. But it becomes more financials than it does about the strategy and how that business can really catapult them to the next level, if that makes sense. And so, did we answer that question? I think we did.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
I think also, a strategic buyer could be looking at both expansion and culture. Private equity is going to basically be looking at the numbers and the growth pattern. So,
Yeah, if it's an add-on, they'll look at how it fits strategically. But I agree, it typically comes down to a financial buy. Does the numbers make sense, etc. As strategics looking at geographical, hey, I want to be in Texas. Hey, I want to be in Arizona. Hey, I want to be in Louisiana. Or you know what? If I bought that manufacturing facility, then I can add on to my manufacturing, and I don't have to have their distribution plant. So that already gives me, $5, $10 million increase in EBITDA. So they look at things very differently. It's a financial buyer versus a strategic buyer. Usually, a strategic buyer is always going to pay more.
yeah. Yeah, because they see not just what they're buying, but the impact it's going to have on what they already own, versus and their business may be able to expand its distribution with its products in addition to buying sales for the company that and the products that they offer. So
Right.
it's
So
an
yeah,
exponential benefit.
everyone keep their questions coming. I love questions. Keep your questions coming, comments coming. It is 2-year anniversary of Exit Rich, so I will send out a copy signed by me and forged Sharon's signature. To anybody who has the best comments and best questions. You okay with me forging your
You
signature
have my permission to sign my name.
in a book? That's it.
Yeah, on the
Remember,
book
you do teach
for,
financial
for
literacy.
these few people here.
Remember, you do teach financial literacy, right? Now, not to get ripped off.
Yeah, my
So,
husband would probably kill me right now, but that's all right. He's the IP attorney.
so what type of feedback have you been getting from Exit Rich? I know that you've been speaking at really large events, bringing, you hit me with some of these big orders, which is
Well,
great.
everybody that is watching and listening to this right now, I mean, this book has gone so many different places. I did a special program with Cardone Ventures on Exit Rich, so that it would add, to value to their clients. And I was speaking at the President's Summit over in Europe. CEOs and presidents all over the world were there. And I've been speaking to women presence organization groups as well on Exit Rich. So it really is such an incredible gift. I've been on into 5 different cities with the EO Entrepreneurs Organization, and I know you have too, Michelle. So it's really the beauty of what this book is it's the combination of my almost 45 years experience, and Michelle's quite a bit younger. So let's say 25 or 30 years experience from Michelle. But the combination of our experiences, which are very diverse, and it was an absolute pleasure to work with alongside Michelle to create this. And there were a few things we didn't agree on, and we talk about that in the book. But most of it, we were singing the same tune and rhyming with each other. But it's really such an incredible tool because it's based from experience. Experiential learning is the best. It's not just dictating educational principles, but truly what to look for, how to build your business from the ground up. So if you're a brand new business owner, it's a great roadmap. If you are an existing business owner, it's a great tool to really firm up and solidify your systems in your business to position yourself for growth as well as to position yourself for sale. Also, what I've seen is a lot of venture capital people, a lot of people are using this book to help them in the buying process. So it's not just the selling process, but in the buying process, what should I be looking for when I'm buying a business?
Mhm.
I have a gal that is a client of mine that's looking at franchising her operation. I said, read Exit Rich first and see what you can do to continue putting yourself and position yourself in the place of greatest and highest potential.
Mhm.
I mean, Steve Forbes, he's a friend of mine. He said, so many business owners end up leaving equity on the table. This book will be a gold mine for those entrepreneurs. And it really is a true statement.
Yeah, and a lot of feedback that I've received, and there's tons and tons of reviews on Amazon, and obviously we have lots of reviews on the book. But a lot of feedback I've been getting is, my God, I wish I've known this 20 years ago in their company. Because just because you've been running a business for 10, 15, 20 years doesn't mean you're doing it right. In fact, the landscape has changed dramatically, Sharon. It used to be, and I know you know this because you've heard me say it time and time again, it used to be where we had 25, I'm sorry, it used to be where we had 95 to 98% of all startups would fail in the first 5 years, right? Startups always got it wrong, right? Startups
Mhm.
are so difficult. And so now, though, that landscape has changed dramatically. Only 30% of startups are actually going out of business now. 30%. But guess what? Out of 30.2 million businesses, 70% of business owners that have been in business 10 years or longer, they're dropping like flies. They're going out of business.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
number one reason for that, I always say, is lack of aim. Aim is always market and innovate, right? Always innovate and market, always innovate and market, always innovate and market. People get complacent and they don't realize technology, AI, all these new things are coming to the platform, to the forefront. And if you don't innovate, if you don't market, you're going to be out of business. And so the landscape has really, really changed. So everybody has said, gosh, I wish I knew this. I wish I knew that. I wish I would have done this. And I always say it's never too late to start.
Well, we don't know what we don't know, Michelle. And a business owner is an expert in what they do and how they do it. They may not be an expert in accounting. They may not be an expert in legal. In fact, they probably are not. And so it's important to make sure you bring people who do know what they're doing and they can align with you. And believe me, a lot of people say, I can't afford an attorney. Well, you can't afford not to have an attorney because it gets a lot more expenses later than it does at the beginning. I've seen it more often than not. The
I
biggest
agree.
legal issues are with companies that are highly successful when owners, and I see there's a question on here about multiple owners, multiple owners get together and they don't identify things like how to plan the divorce before the marriage or how things are going to go if one of them should be incapacitated or die. And those things become absolute dynamite. They can destroy the business. And so it's better to talk about those things at the beginning and set up how are, we love each other, brightness of future, plan it when you're all very excited about the future, and say, well, one of us is older than the other. Maybe, in 3 years, somebody wants to leave. How are we going to process that? Are we going to get two different valuations? Are we going to look at how we can do that? Is it going to be a 1 year payout, a 5 year payout? Do the work up front while you still are excited about the future, because what happens is when the horrible event happens, it becomes very stressful, high emotion, a lot of drama, a lot of anger, a lot of hurt, a lot of sorrow. I see it time and time again. Best friends end up mortal enemies because they did not address that stuff up front.
Yes, because everybody goes in happily ever after, and it doesn't always end that way. And I'm going through that right now, Sharon. You and I talked a little bit about this before the podcast. I've unfortunately, unexpectedly lost my husband. Um, 7 months ago, and I'm going through this with an estate sale. My husband was a brilliant business mind. He's a doctor, but he's a brilliant business mind as well. And they didn't really write their buy sell agreement correctly, even though they had life insurance policy. They did not write their buy sell agreement properly. They didn't cross the T's, dot the I's. They did update it when they added locations. So it is now a hot mess for me, and I'm in the industry. and, if I could go back, hindsight, and say, "Listen, hubby, let me see that buy sell agreement. Let me
Yeah.
make sure."
Well, our husbands are usually the last ones to listen to us. So
So anyway, it's so important. And Hayden just asked, how is the sales process different if the business has multiple owners? Are there any particular things to look out for when selling your company?
and that's, I think, what we just answered, because I think it's so important. I see it
Well, it's
happen
a
all the time.
nightmare actually because, and I'll expound a little bit on that, Sharon. It's a nightmare. I mean, I had a business we were selling that had 9 family members, 9, and they didn't get along, and they wouldn't agree to anything. And I won't take a company on like that anymore, unless I can agree up front, unless they can all be on the same page. Because I put so much work into it, never ended up selling it because they would never agree on anything. So it does become very difficult. You got to want to make sure that the partners are in line, that they both want to sell. They both
Yeah,
want
you become a
to.
counselor as opposed to a broker.
Well, selling a company, we're psychiatrist, counselor, mom, dad. I mean, we're really everything. CPA, attorney, and it is important to have those resources for sure. I mean, because when somebody hires Seiler Tucker, they don't just get Seiler Tucker. They get the M&A firms that we've been dealing with for over 23 years. They get the accounting firms that we've been dealing with for over 23 years. They get the DST, the First Souls Trust resources, etc. Because you have to have a team to sell your company. And then Pike says, "What is your favorite piece of advice from Exit Rich and why?" Read it. What would you say on that one, Sharon? There's so much advice, so much favorite pieces. Um,
It's like asking me, who's my favorite child. There's so many elements, and some people say, well, I can tell you who my favorite kid is, but no, I think it's really, there's so much content in the book. I think the favorite piece of advice is the fact that we wrote it, basically, because it really does. My mentoring clients pay me $50,000 to $100,000 a year to work with them and apply the principles of Exit Rich. My husband and I have an online course called Success Essential Components of a Successful Business that's thousands of dollars. This book is $27 or whatever the price is, and it has thousands, if not millions of dollars of advice in it. So the fact that it exists is my favorite issue, because I'm glad that we were able to get together and create it. So that's would be my answer.
I'm glad too, and I'm grateful because I remember when David Corbin, our very good friend, said, "Oh, I think Sharon Lechter would be a great co-author." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what she's a New York Times bestselling author of 5 books. What if she doesn't like it? What if she doesn't like my writing style? What if she doesn't like my content?" He's like, "Just shut up already, Michelle." And she came back and said she likes it. So I was grateful for that. Thank you, Sharon.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I think it's just reading it. I mean, we too have a coaching program called the Road to Exit Rich that really works for business owners a year to 2, 3 years before they're getting ready to sell their business. Because a lot of business owners think, look, I got a great business. I got a wonderful business. It's awesome. There's nothing wrong with it. Let's just put it on the market and get it sold. Well, that's not reality. There's so many missing things in companies, so many things that have to be tweaked, so many things that have to be fixed, overhauled. Like I said, that company has 60 independent contractors. That's a nightmare. And so there's so many little things that you really have to figure out now because it's not just you might decide you want to keep the business. A lot of times the reason you want to sell it is because it's so bad. So it's really going through the Exit Rich coaching or insurance coaching or any of our programs to figure out, what are the issues and why do you not have a business that can run without you versus a job that needs you.
Yep.
Matt says, "How do you approach?" Oh, this is up your alley, Sharon. How do you approach investing, and what advice do you have for people who are just starting
Well,
out?
thanks for the question, Matt. And yes, when you Exit Rich is a great tool to use in evaluating companies that you want to invest in because you can really analyze do they have they checked all 6 P's? Do they really focus on that? And when you're talking about investing, I talk about diversification across all asset classes: paper assets, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, real estate, intellectual property, businesses. Those are all assets. And so you want to diversify across all asset categories. But I know we only have a few minutes left on this. So I'm happy for you to reach out to SharonLechter.com. There's information there about other programs that can give you more specific advice on investing. I have a real estate investing course online, as well as the essential components of a successful business, as well as 3 Feet from Gold with Greg Reed and Think and Grow Rich for Women, all of which address investing. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, and make sure you go to her site. So that's why I said this one's for you. And remember, she did write Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah. And Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, which kind of covers that stuff too. So
So Tiff says, looking ahead, what trends of development do you foresee? Remember, I can't see Sharon. Do you foresee in the business landscape that entrepreneurs should be aware of? I know you already touched on social media a little bit, but is there anything else that you see?
what? Yeah, that's a great question, Tip, and I'll address that one with a really hot topic. Okay, and I'm going to go against the grain here.
Is that AI?
AI is here to stay. AI is very important. It's here to stay, but be very, very careful. There's lots of litigation going on right now. If you use your free AI tool and you say, "I'm going to write a book on exiting rich," all right, is going to generate something for you and you slap your name on it, is it truly yours?
No, it's
And do
yours.
you know where the AI sourced all that stuff, right? So I tell people right now, from a standpoint of me, use AI as a research tool, but then put it in your own words or change it up a little bit so that and make sure that if there's a mention of a resource, that is actually true, because there's been a lot of misinformation starting to spread through AI. So that's one of the biggest trends in businesses, and the jury's still out. There's so many cases right now related to the intellectual property, and Mike and I are kind of the intellectual property king and queen. So we've got big caution signs up when it comes to use it, but make sure you identify it as yours.
Yeah, because they say AI lies.
It
And that's
does.
been the
It
trend
does.
going
It
in.
does. And you don't know where it's sourcing that information. Somebody, posts something out on the internet that's totally garbage. Well, the AI doesn't know that it's garbage. It's picking it up along with everything else. So
And
it's
it can be
really
picking up
important.
stuff from our book too.
I tell people, the first step is to you generate something through AI, then find a platform that is a plagiarism software. And first step, run it through that to make sure that whatever AI is giving you doesn't belong to somebody else.
Yeah, there were attorneys. I don't know if you read about this or heard about this, but there were attorneys that fired their paralegals. And, because everybody thinks, ooh, I can save on labor costs. And that's going to happen, obviously, in the future. But I don't think it's there yet. But attorneys were doing their own briefs and stuff. Anyway, they were going in court and it was all wrong. And the judge is like, listen, you cannot use AI. or you haven't read it, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. And so it's funny they're getting kicked out. I've heard medical doctors are having some similar issues too. So AI lies. It's going to get better and better and better, but it's just caution right now on using AI, right? And so then Jacob asked, "What was it like working together? What was it like working together with Michelle on Exit Ridge? Do you find it easier to collaborate on writing, or is it easier to collaborate on a sell?"
Well, that's an interesting question. Michelle and I have not collaborated on a sale, only writing, and it was an absolute pleasure. Right now, my new book that's coming out in a couple of weeks is called How Money Works for Women. It's
How many
also,
women? Let's put that in the comments real quick.
yeah,
Sorry,
How Money Works for Women.
let's put
And
that.
it's available on my website right now. And it's something that is a collaborative effort with Kim Schooler, who's the top female producer in Wealth Wave. And it's just been an absolute pleasure as well. So, again, is it gives you the opportunity to, she's an attorney. And so the two of us, again, have very different backgrounds, very different philosophies. And we came together. And what we've done is we've taken women from every decade of life, from 19 to 84, about the various things that women face along the way, from college to having a special needs child, to having an illness, to having a sudden divorce, to having becoming a widow, all of these things that happen at various stages, and how to deal with that, and the things they need to consider. It
I
was a
just,
fun project.
I just identify with three of those.
Yeah.
And what's your website? Get that out again.
SharonLechter.com.
So put that in the comments, please. SharonLechter.com, and put the name of her book in there as well.
And tip is How Money Works for Women.
How money
How
works for her.
money
So my
works.
team, if you're listening, please get that in the comments. And then that's great. I think personally, I'll answer this question. I think it's very difficult to collaborate on a sell because I've been in this industry for 23 years. Sometimes real estate brokers want to co-broker and they have the experience of selling real estate, which is very different than selling a company. So that's difficult. I've written a few books, not like Sharon, but I really like collaborating with Sharon because it's a different mind. It's a completely different, it's her perspective. And she's got, even though we come from different backgrounds, we do have similar opinions and similar values and things that we think should be an exit rich. So there was really no pushing. We might have disagreed on a couple of things and we worked it out. But I love her content. I love, her contribution. And I think it was very complimentary to me and my experience. So I'm going to try to get through this last question because I know it's getting.
Well, I'll read the question for you, Michelle, because it's long and it's really for you. The book covers various types of buyers and exit strategies. Could you provide an overview of these different options and discuss how business owners can determine which one is best for their specific situation?
Sure. So yes, I always say there's five types of buyers. We talked about two of them. We talked about private equity groups and we talked about strategics. Private equity groups are going to buy based on platform or add-ons. Strategics are going to buy very congruent, similar companies that will help their business, rather that's by adding proprietary patents, contracts, adding talent to their team, adding additional revenue streams, adding a geographical area that they've been trying to get into, etc. And then you have first time buyers that typically buy smaller businesses, usually under $5 million. They're very nervous. There's a whole section in Exit Rich that talks about the different types of buyers. And then towards the end, where you're talking about negotiations and valuations, there's different negotiating points for each buyer. So first time buyers are going to negotiate, and what's important to them are very different things than what's important to a private equity group. What's important to a turnaround specialist is very different than what's important to a strategic. So there's first time buyers, turnaround specialist, private equity groups, strategic. Am I missing one of my buyers? You got the first time
First
buyers,
time,
turnaround,
first time, yeah, first time buyers.
turnaround specialist, private equity groups, strategic. You got the strategic buyer. Oh, you got the financial buyer, I believe. So there are, if I encourage you to go read the end, well, read the entire book, but for negotiating points, certainly go to the end where it talks about negotiations and those five different types of buyers.
Yeah, and understand that they're all looking for different things. When we sold the Talking Book Company, um, we were looking at, because it was a electronic, so it had electronics back in the late '80s, and so toy companies were coming to us. They wanted to buy these talking books from a toy perspective, and I literally went through due diligence with the five top toy companies. And then this little silent company came in that was a huge publisher of books, including children's books. And the publisher came in and said, this is a way for them to establish and use their resources in publishing, but add this new facet of a digital and electronic component. And so the toy companies were looking at this as, as a basically an add-on to their ongoing business, but the publishing saw this is an opportunity for them to step into a whole new industry. And they by far were the best company that we ended up, and we'd already been down the road with all these toy companies, and then this little turtle comes up and says, oh, don't say yes yet, listen to our deal. So you just want to make sure you make yourself available to the potential buyers that will work for you in the best way.
Yeah, and just answering that second part, how do business owners, how can business owners determine which one is best for them? Well, that's hard for a business owner sometimes because, like Sharon just thought, she thought it was all toy companies, right? Sometimes it's very hard for an owner to like, oh, this is my buyer, this is my buyer. I have owners call me all the time and say, Michelle, will you charge me half your commission or charge me a lot less because I have the buyer? And I'm like, okay, you say you have the buyer, but the likelihood of that buyer closing is slim to none. Besides, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket because how can you create a bidding war? In all likelihood, that this buyer actually closes on your business is slim to none. So you want multiple buyers coming because you want to create that bidding war. Plus, even though you say you have the buyers, we're going to go out there and find really strategic buyers like we did in the case of that oil company. And by the way, that oil company paid 160% more than what the business was evaluated for. So you really need an expert to help you determine who the buyers are going to be because again, it's going to
And
be that
that
put
comes from that goodwill component, right? I mean,
yeah,
they wanted that strategic relationship with BP, so they were willing to pay a huge amount of intangible value
right.
to them that wasn't necessarily a value to someone else.
Right. So it depends on what you have to. So what we do is we create the value. Not all M&A advisors are alike. So you really want to find one that creates the value and creates the value in the SIM, the marketing material that they send out. We strategically look for that right buyer fit before we start sending out that marketing material. But you want to make sure that that someone's creating the value for you because you're not going to always know the value in your company. What you think is the value is not always what the value is. And so you want somebody that's going to showcase that, highlight that, find the buyers. Like I found the buyer that said, hey, they got distribution centers nationwide. This is perfect because it will increase their EBITDA. And you got to find that one thing, like Sharon just said, that they're willing to pay top dollar for. And for that buyer, it was BP that they were willing to pay top dollar for. All right. How many works for women? What?
That was supposed to say how money works for women.
How money? Can we correct that, please? How money works?
They corrected it. We're good. We're good. I
Okay,
think
good.
that's the last of the question. So
Okay. I think we're good. All right, Sharon. So, any last minute words of wisdom, which I know you always have. In our book, we call them golden nuggets.
well, I love it. You and I haven't spoken in a while, so it's always good to reconnect and be together and to celebrate what we created because I think it's really a very special book. I think it's something that obviously Inc. magazine thought so because they sponsored it and they asked us to do it together, and just incredible resource tool from so many people. And I've heard nothing but positive things from people who've read it. In fact, I've been asked when's the sequel, and I said, well, when you sell your business, I'm not quite sure. The sequel might be, enjoying life. I think, you want to create a life you don't need a vacation from. So we
Now I
get
got a great sequel. I'm gonna come back to you, the author of the sequel with me. I already have something in mind, Sharon.
all right, bring it on. So,
This will
but
be
all of you, just please, if you've read it and you found value, please share it with your network because you're giving them the gift of a lifetime financial education. So many people, they have wonderful businesses that aren't worth near what they think they are because they haven't followed the tenets that we describe in Exit Rich. So if you have people you care about, buy them a book. It's inexpensive. It's a great gift and it can change their direction, their life, and help them create generational wealth.
and it's also available in the audio version for even less. So you can also, unfortunately, you can't hear Sharon and I, and but it is a great, great audio version, and so you can go out and get that too. Get them as gifts, share it with your network. And so, any last minute business thoughts, or how people can reach out to you again, Sharon? And we'll make sure we share.
Absolutely. Please, my email is info at Sharon Lechter, and you can go to my website, sharonlechter.com. There's contact information on the website as well. And know that, both Michelle and I, are coming to the table with tons of experience. So don't hesitate to reach out. And certainly, Michelle is 100% dedicated to helping you add value and sell your business. And I'm here to help you add that value and help you create the greatest opportunity for generational wealth. So thank you.
And me too. So, thank you, Sharon. It was a great reunion.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
You and I need to create and host our own event together.
Yes, we should. We
That would
should.
be
We should have an
powerful.
exit rich event. You bet. I'm
Absolutely.
ready.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that. We'll plan that,
All
and we'll
right.
plan our next book. So everybody, stay tuned for the next Exit Rich version.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Sharon, for being a great
Thank you.
guest as always, and it's great to see your beautiful face.
Yeah. Take
Thank
care.
you to all my
Bye,
Exit
everybody.
listeners. Thank you to all the Exit Rich listeners. Again, please, I know you're going to love this podcast. So many golden nuggets shared. Go back and share it with your network, share it with your spheres of influence. Make sure you comment, make sure you like it, and make sure you subscribe to Exit Rich. Until next Wednesday. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.